And with that, we are beginning the segment with the focus on the India-US trade deal. It's a joint statement that had in fact released the interim framework within that very trade deal as it is taking final shape as we speak. And now, as we speak shortly, in just probably a few minutes as we are learning, the Commerce Ministry briefing on this trade deal shall begin. India-US seal the interim trade framework. It's a key government briefing on India-US trade deal, decoding what the India-US interim trade framework entails. Remember, as this announcement had come in the early hours of the day from the US and India in that joint statement that was released, conversations, speculations, questions have already started pouring in, and that too from the opposition at this point of time, especially with regards to India reducing tariffs to 0% on US industrial goods and also the agricultural sector and what it means to open up US imports in that very sector, to which, of course, the ministry has already, the government, especially the Commerce Ministry, has already spoken, saying that the agricultural sector has been well safeguarded, and that's kept in mind, the farmers' interests being paramount and protected, and that in fact is showcased in the very deal, especially with the fact that there's a list of items that's been excluded from the import list itself. So that also makes up for a lot of the questions being asked by the opposition at this point of time. But of course, there is a lot that's gone into this deal. There's a big joint statement there's a lengthy joint statement rather that's been released early this morning, which needs to be decoded into, which needs to be, the finer points need to be understood, and that is exactly what this briefing will be about. So this is the India-US trade deal that we've been focusing on since the very beginning of the day. A lot has already been spoken from several ministers itself, from the government itself, be the Prime Minister himself or also the ambassadors on either side, Sergio Gore and Vinay Quatra. They've both in fact hailed this very framework. Remember, it's come after a lot of negotiations, years of talks for sure, but just the last year had seen a lot of turbulent times when we speak of this very agreement taking shape, because there was almost a time somewhere around the middle of 2025, between that period between July to August, when whether a trade deal shall be struck at all or not was also in question. And then from that very stage, taking a U-turn to now finally coming up with a framework, and a solid framework at that, which has finally been released. An interim framework, of course, that's been released in that joint statement. That's how far we have come. And it will be, of course, a historic trade agreement that will be signed by the two countries, renewing, strengthening, cementing the strategic partnership that already exists between the two countries, while also bringing in a new chapter with, of course, its own benefits and also certain challenges that are definitely being looked into at this point of time to understand how to maneuver around them and make sure both ends are happy and the deal is done in good faith. Let's in fact take you through the details of what all has happened since morning as the joint statement was released. It's Prime Minister Modi who hailed the India-US trade deal early this morning itself, shortly after the joint statement had come in, wherein he said that the deal reflects the growing depth, the trust and the dynamism of the partnership between the both countries. Prime Minister has also thanked the United States President Donald Trump for his personal commitment to robust ties between New Delhi and Washington. India and the US unveiled a framework for an interim trade agreement, signaling renewed momentum toward a broader bilateral trade pact. Under the new agreement, US tariffs on Indian goods will be reduced to 18%. India will remove or reduce tariffs on all US industrial goods and a broad basket of agricultural products, including dried distillers' grain and red sorghum for animal feed, tree nuts, fresh and processed fruits, soybean oil, wine and spirits. Piyush Goyal described this agreement as a landmark deal. He said it would open up a $30 trillion market for Indian exporters, particularly benefiting those MSMEs, farmers and fishermen out there. Now, as we've brought to you all the details of what all has gone about so far, Rohit Sharma joins us from Washington, who's been keeping a very keen watch and a close watch on how the deal has been formulated since day one. Rohit, very good afternoon to you from India. What do you make of this very joint statement at the very beginning?
Look, the joint statement has been billed as the interim trade deal framework, and very interesting choice of words there. But I think what it does tell you is that we have a framework to achieve the bilateral trade agreement. I mean, this was a long time coming. India and the US has, used a lot of time announcing this agreement, or I should say, the interim agreement, which would guide India and the US both towards getting that elusive trade deal. What it also does, it mentions everything that President Trump had said during his Truth Social post. It talks about how India should be stopping purchasing oil from Russia. It talks about increasing the trade between the U.S. and India up to $500 billion in the next 5 years, and also talking about opening up agriculture market for certain segments. So I think this is something very so that was awaited for a while since President Trump's announcement on Monday. And what it does is, it gives answer to the questions that were being asked for the last week, allows both nations to negotiate a free and fair trade deal, and also making sure that this big roadblock into the relationship, that both nations can move beyond that and work towards forming and forging the kind of relationship we had with the United States, which was before Trump 2.0.
So, Rohit, the big question that now comes to everyone's mind at this point of time is, what does India gain from this very deal?
Well, India gains a lot. India gains, the first thing is India gains, and Indian companies, the medium size and small businesses and exporters, they gain access to a $30 trillion economy without paying 50% tariffs, right? I mean, that's the big number. There is no country in the world that is not paying tariffs in the United States. And for India to be able to get 18% from Trump administration, I think it's a sweet deal in terms of allowing Indian exporters to export stuff, and also making sure that India can diversify the imports, even if when it comes to buying oil from other nations, including something that President Trump has floated, buying cheaper oil from Venezuela. So I think, yes, it is something that we'll have to wait and watch. It is allowing Indian exporters to be able to explore new market. There are discounts on IT services. There's going to be discounts and exceptions on other sectors, including jewelry and other and textiles, and even some agriculture products. So I think we are not, again, critics would say, well, it's not 0%, but then which country is paying 0% tariffs right now? Nobody. So I think it's a good deal in those terms. We'll still have to wait and watch what kind of exceptions we get in the final agreement. But I think as of tonight, India is not paying 50%. India is not paying 25%. India is only paying 18%. And that's a huge boost for the Indian businesses.
Another crucial part that's been flagged quite a few times is that the agricultural products, and I would just request you to take us through the agricultural products that will in fact be exempted from duty, and that has triggered this furor in India as to what happens next to the farmers then.
Well, the agricultural goods mentioned, are for animal feed and ethanol production, and certain fruits and dry fruits, and which again have been not mentioned. And then, allowing the American wines and spirits, including red sorghum, something that USTR was able to put it out on tweet. So we'll have to wait and watch, what kind of agriculture goods are mentioned, and what can we do in terms of announcing, or I guess in terms of finally seeing, what those exceptions finally look at. And those are the things we'll have to wait and watch. But as of now, I think this is going to be a very, again, a kind of, I don't want to say the word controversial, but a very closely watched topic when it comes to the bilateral trade agreement.
So, Rohit, have the negotiations between US and India concluded? What are you hearing in Washington at this point of time? Because if they are still ongoing, when are they expected to be completed? When is this timeline coming to an end?
Look, the negotiations will continue in the sense of the bilateral trade agreement. I think they are still ongoing in the sense that we don't have a deal, we have a trade framework, and I think it took a long time to announce that trade framework. Now I think the nitty and gritty of the agreement will be decided, which is a standard process, which is what America is doing with a lot of other partners. So I think we're going to be following the same process. There has been talks about we could announce it by March. We'll have to wait and watch. But I think at least for now, both the sides will be negotiating within that trade framework, and we'll have to see, how soon can we conclude, or they can conclude a BTA, which could take time, or it could be sooner. It all depends on how close we are to, an agreement in terms of announcing the trade deal.